Sears shows us the history of the island through the eyes of the people who live there today.
It's so nice to look out in the morning and see the deer grazing on the lawn. And
Virginia Blackwood is manager of the Button Gwinnett House on St. Catherine's Island. An artist, she's lived here for 10 years.
And there's so much color and so much pattern and form. And being a painter, I've found so much to paint and work with while I've been here on the island. It's a beautiful spot and a unique spot.
Ospreys have been calling for centuries here before the Spanish entered the kingdom of the Wale Indians 400 years ago. Now, only now are we learning how vast that Wale kingdom was, how successful the Spanish mission was.
But just in the cemetery, we've got something on the order of 50,000 beads. You know, just the volume of things are incredible. You can't dig anywhere without finding that. And you're just looking at her taking out a few of the concentrations, but that's just a drop in the bucket compared with what's coming out.
That's wonderful. After the Spanish, 50 years of silence on St. Catherine's. And then James Oglethorpe arrived. The colony of Georgia was born. And an Indian woman took over St. Catherine's. Of all the people who controlled St. Catherine's Island over the years, none captured its spirit better than Mary Musgrove. She was part Creek Indian. She was General Oglethorpe's interpreter. And when the British needed some help getting a treaty from the Indians for possession of many of these barrier islands, she agreed to help. Her part of the deal, her broker's fee, was possession of St. Catherine's Island. She lived here for years with her third husband, the Reverend Bosomworth, and when she died on her beloved St. Catherine's, they buried her in this mound. They've called it Mary's Mound ever since. And then there was Button Gwinnett. He may have entertained on that generous veranda. He fell under the island's spell. He signed the Declaration of Independence, but he called himself Button Gwinnett of St. Catherine's Island. In those slave quarters built of oyster shell tabby, generations of black people lived and pulled Sea Island cotton from the soil. After the Civil War, a black visionary, Tunis Campbell, ran the island under orders from General Sherman. Campbell ran it as a haven, a black colony. Federal troops forced them off after Reconstruction. And now the island is controlled by the family whose fortune came from Lifesaver Candies, the Noble family and the Noble Foundation in New York. The Rockefellers visited them on the island. Lady Astor came. She wanted to use the swimming pool, but first they had to fish an alligator out. Today, life on the island follows the rhythms of the school boat, bringing the children of the 3 families of scientists who live here back from school on the mainland. The children call the mainland the other side.
Seems like a luxury.
Yeah, that seems like a luxury.
To handle a grocery sack only one time. You know, the way they're making grocery sacks today, by the time they sit in the deck of a damp boat, usually there's just handfuls of groceries. You know, all the sacks tear, and so it's kind of just throw everything in the back of the truck kind of loose.
Royce and Betsy Hayes met as high school sweethearts in Macon. They've been taking care of St. Catherine's for 10 years now.
When we first started running the school boat, we left here at 6:30 every morning. And after a couple of weeks, we only had one. Our oldest child was going out then. She started complaining. So one afternoon, after school, we went up and sat in a blind and waited for the bald eagles to come into a nest further south from here. And after that was over, I said, well, it's pretty nice, huh? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, you can't do that just anywhere. And she said, yeah. And I said, well, everything has a price. And to be able to go do that after school, you have to be able to ride that boat in the morning. And she was in the 1st grade then, and she hasn't complained since about the boat ride.
The Hayes entertain hosts of world-class scientists here.
It's sort of like being at a university without all the students.
Yeah, having direct access to the teacher, to the specialist, you know, just finding out everything you could possibly want to know.
knowing more about wildlife which used to flourish here. And that's the promise of St. Catherine's Island. A survival project is raising endangered species here for the rest of the world. And so the future and the past of St. Catherine's are meeting today in the beauty of a sunset as ageless as the island.
What a place. It just takes my prose away. And the animals on the island, they make the newsroom look like amateurs. It's really wonderful.
Don't
Why,
be too
Sally?
unkind. Now, I understand that Sunday, you and photographer Carol Lynn have brought back some animal pictures.
That Wildlife Endangered Species Project is some of the strangest animals you've ever seen on the Georgia coast. They are at home there, and it is a lovely story Sunday night.
This Sunday
All
at
right,
6.
We'll look forward to it. Fascinating
Thanks.
stories this week.
Thank you.
Jeff Ullinger is here, and he says that there were tiny strip off the Georgia coast, today yielding surprising scientific findings about Georgia's earliest history. It is also home to an incredible breeding project for rare animals. Thoreau tells us in Walden that the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. From the desperate cities, he says, you go into the desperate country and home to console yourself with the bravery of minks and muskrats. We have found animals in Georgia far more in need of consolation than Thoreau's minks and muskrats.
It has been decades since the sandhill crane flew wild over Georgia's barrier islands. Generations of hunters wiped the islands clean. If the big birds do come back, it will be because of St. Catherine's Island. The survival project for endangered species here is raising baby sandhill cranes to repopulate the Georgia coast. And in the process, it's turning St. Catherine's into a fertility clinic.
We don't exist in isolation here on St. Catherine's. This is part of a worldwide, nationwide effort of coordination between zoos to manage species in captivity that are endangered or threatened in the wild, with the hope that at some point in the future, conditions in the wild will stabilize and those populations can be reestablished.
In a few miles, this island compresses some of the widest range of habitats on Earth, from dry African uplands to marshy subtropics like South America. Turning this stew of ecological microsystems into a nursery began 11 years ago with a handful of African gemsbok in a 5-acre pasture. The zoos that sponsor this project wanted to make sure that the island held no hidden dangers for rare animals. The experiment was such a success, they're sending the gemsbok away to make room for more threatened animals. Sadly, there are plenty. The Dama gazelle, the largest of all the gazelles from North Africa, is almost extinct today. Bible scholars believe that this is the animal, the hart, from the Song of Solomon.
This past fall, we were able to send 3 females to Libya, where the species originally occurred and is now extinct.
The modern armies of Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi are said to have feasted on Dama gazelles.
While the Libyan army was in Chad, where the largest concentrations of Dama gazelles still occur, they occupied the reserve where these animals are concentrated, and there is real evidence that large numbers of them were probably killed as a result of that activity.
From war to hunters to subsistence farmers, the dangers to the animals are increasing. This is the only herd of Jackson's hartebeest in the whole Western Hemisphere. And the rare, slender-horned gazelle.
Do you think these are completely gone in the wild?
And they haven't been sighted since the late 1970s in the wild. Now, they come from a remote area, from some remote areas, and there may be some left, but they haven't been seen.
You're looking at the only male angulated tortoise in the West. They believe the numbers of these in the wild is below 100 now and dropping.
When she's in like this, she's virtually impregnable. There's no way that a carnivore could get a bite on her anywhere and grab any flesh.
Look at the color of
The radiated tortoise and the Aldabra tortoise from the Seychelles Islands, largest in the world, a living reminder of the dinosaurs. And birds from Australia, from Tasmania, the Caribbean, macaws and rare cockatoos.
Political instability is the great tragedy for the wildlife as well as for the human population in any third world country.
All the wattle cranes that were there They've probably moved up into northern Botswana, into the Okavango Delta.
John Yadarosa temporarily clips the flying feathers off the rarest cranes. Others nest in the marshes with herons and egrets. This animal, a lemur, is part of a new experiment on St. Catharines. These will be turned loose on the island with radio collars to track them to see if they breed better outside their cages. But turning an animal loose in a new habitat could be dangerous. Could they take over like kudzu? That's not a big fear, mammalogist Jim Murtaugh thinks. Lemurs don't travel far. In their native Madagascar, the tiny island home off the African coast, farmers there are taking over the lemur's habitat. If they don't make it here, lemurs may be gone from the wild forever.
They're on deposit with us until conditions are suitable to return them to the wild.
We have the technology to save them, and we also have the technology to just wipe everything else but man off the face of the earth. And I think it would be a pretty boring earth if we did that.